For this assignment, I chose to teach the creative writing lesson that I developed in week 9 of this course. Luckily, as I teach 6th grade, my colleague in the high school, which is only next door, agreed to let me teach his 9th grade class. The timing was perfect as his 9th grade class was during my prep, and I had the ability to walk from my course to his in plenty of time. Also, the timing in the year was perfect, as they had just began to study the period our lesson focuses upon. I chose this lesson for 3 reasons. First, the applicability of the lesson. This lesson really captures the historical understandings of my colleague and what he was hoping to portray to his students about the antebellum era and the anti-slavery movement. Second was interest. This lesson is on a topic, antebellum America and the anti-slavery movement, that I have always been completely enthralled in. Additionally, I love the opportunity to teach a different age group. This lesson, designed for 9th grade students, was a fun experience for me and a great way to get me out of my middle school paradigm. Third, the lesson is effective. I felt this lesson was the most effective one I had written this semester, and I hope to use it as an actual classroom experience. When I was discussing my assignment with my colleague from the high school, who was excited about the opportunity to teach the topic through a literary perspective. Additionally, the creative, artistic representations that students could portray was seen by him and I as an effective way to show how a different era would convince others to change their perspective on an issue. We prepared by this lesson, obviously from a scheduling standpoint, by finding me a place to teach it. The next thing I had to do was I had to gather materials for the lesson and examples for students to use. This part would have proved difficult if it weren't for my colleague already researching materials to teach the topic to the students. I was in a great position, seeing as he was concerned about teaching this for so long that I was able to come in with my lesson and borrow many of the materials he had already found for class. I was excited about the opportunity to teach a different set of students. However, what I think I was most excited about was the ability to use an integrated lesson inside a social studies classroom. I know from experience that these types of lessons often create high interest in the students themselves. I was excited to see students become enthralled in the history that I for so long had been interested in. Additionally, the creative results that they would make were something that they could carry with them throughout the rest of their high school experience, and the resources which they would need to gather to create our project were beneficial to them as academic students, because they would be forced to reach out to people outside the history classroom itself. We began the lesson by introducing the students first to our case study of a new school rule. We asked their opinion on a new school policy that required all freshmen to partner, and we put that in quotes, with seniors. The seniors would be asked to have freshmen do their homework, clean their lockers, carry their books and bags, and even sit in on class for them. There would be no effect to sophomores, juniors, or teachers, so they were actually removed from the situation. We asked students to think about how this would make them feel, and if the sophomores or juniors would even care. We asked that if sophomores and juniors did care, those few that would be brave enough to speak up, how could they actually do so to make a positive difference? Our responses varied a great deal. For example, one student raised their hand and asked, "Mr. F, could they just write letters?" Another student said, "They could give speeches." And another, "They won't care if they couldn't benefit from it." We moved on to our 3 learning experiences, and from there we asked students to actually complete centers. Many of our students hadn't completed centers since early middle school or elementary school. At each of the centers we had materials ready for them, with annotated literature from the abolitionists, biographies, examples, and we asked students to fill in a graphic organizer as they visited each center. The intended purpose of this was that students could actually write a reflection for homework, asking which tool of the abolitionists they felt was most impactful, especially after considering the historical evidence we gave them. The end result of opening the class with our example rule from school and with our subsequent discussion and centers was to give students a clear vision of the fact that sometimes through our history we have had justification for atrocious actions, and that those who are willing to stand up against it must find a vehicle for their expression of displeasure. We felt that by giving actual examples from history and by annotating them for those students with reading difficulties or cognitive difficulties, we could make our objective better met. And the next day we asked students to share what they had felt. After what they shared, we made them aware that they would actually be abolitionists themselves. And we asked them to become contributors to the newspaper The Freeman's Voice. Written in support of abolition, they would create one of 3 types of creative writing. They could either write a song, a poem, or a short story that would be published in the paper in an attempt to convince people to end slavery. The sources and the literature created by the students would hopefully be completed by the end of day 3, which is truly 4 days from the time of implementation. In our case, we are actually in day 3 of that project, and we will not have the results back for quite some time. Once we gather the Freeman's Voice articles, we will print them onto newsprint and distribute these newspapers to the students. The students are then going to be assigned to write 2 letters to the editor where they are asked to both debate and defend the work of one of their peers. The idea being, from our objective standpoint, that students would be able to see the perspective of slavery and the difficulty of ending and supporting slavery from both perspectives. Our objective is that students understand the complexities of the abolitionist movement in terms of the difficulty of ending slavery and the benefit of the medium of songs, poems, and speeches to the abolitionist movement. The students will be assessed using a rubric for creative writing that was collaborated upon by my colleague and the high school ELA department. The students will be assessed in social studies based on their accuracy, the arguments themselves, and their ability to take the role of a historical figure. Additionally, their rubric has a spot for their research process, and they will be asked to use the MLA citation format that they use in their ELA classes. The documented examples of final results are not available yet because students are actually in the process of taking this project. This is kept. They finish a graphic organizer as they wrote their reactions to the work of abolitionists in their centers, but this was kept with them so that they could write their songs, poems, or short stories in support of abolition. After 4 classroom visits, that were all during my prep period, our students are now in a more creative part of their project. The abolitionist centers took 2 more days than we assumed. The irony was that we thought the creative portions of the project would take longer. Rather, it seems that the students needed more time to read through the material from the era and respond to their graphic organizers. The feedback we are getting about the creative pieces is very positive. Students are enthralled in finding examples of slavery and how they could use these in their creative process. They are getting support from the librarian, the history teacher, and their ELA teachers. I find this to be important to them as ninth graders, where they need to learn the academic resources that are at their disposal as they become more independent learners. Overall, I would complete the lesson again. However, I don't teach ninth grade. My colleague says, depending on the success of the final product, he does plan on using this project again for abolition next year. He's very excited about the process thus far, and he hopes to make small improvements to the project so that next year goes even smoother. I feel that ways to improve this lesson would be to provide more time on the front end while the students are exploring the original work of the abolitionists, and also perhaps to have a ready-made source list for students to research specific examples of abuse from slavery that they can use in their defense of abolitionism. Thank you for your time, and I appreciate your evaluation of this lesson and our process.